They saw a hoodie. They saw skin color. They saw a man sitting on a bench outside a federal building at 7 in the morning and decided, before he said a single word, that he did not belong there. What officers Troy Bassett and Craig Nolan of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department did not see was the ID card folded in his front pocket. They did not see the calluses on his hands from years of ocean water and rope lines. They did not see the thing behind his eyes, that specific and terrible stillness that belongs only to men who have operated in places where losing focus meant not coming home. They saw a target. They were wrong. The morning was cold for Southern California. A hard November chill had come off the high desert overnight and settled into the valley below, and the man on the bench, Marcus Webb, 36, first-name basis, with zero dark 30 and the kind of composure that made people around him speak more quietly without knowing why, was sitting with a paper cup of coffee in a silence that most people would have read as peace. Bassett read it as suspicious. He had been cruising the government complex perimeter on his morning patrol when he spotted Marcus. He saw the gray hoodie. He saw the way the man was not using a phone or reading anything. He saw, through the windshield of a county cruiser, a black man sitting outside a federal building doing nothing at all. And he decided that doing nothing at all in this location, at this hour, was probable cause enough to check. He pulled over. Nolan got out on the passenger side before the cruiser had fully stopped. Marcus heard the doors and tracked both officers without turning his head. His eyes moved in the reflection of the glass entrance ahead of him, logging their body language, their hand positions, the angles of their approach. He had learned this in Coronado. He had refined it in Kandahar, in the Kunar province, in a dozen other places where the ability to read a room from your peripheral vision was not a skill but a survival condition. He knew exactly what was coming. He set his coffee cup down on the armrest of the bench. He placed both hands on his knees, palms flat, fully visible. "Don't move," Bassett said, stepping directly into Marcus's sight line. "Hands where I can see them." "They are," Marcus said. "Stand up." "Can I ask what this is about?" "Stand up now." Marcus stood. Slowly, deliberately. He rose to his full 6'2", and for a brief moment Bassett took a half step back before he caught himself. Marcus put his hands slightly out from his body, palms forward, the universal signal for "I am not a threat," and waited. "You got ID?" Nolan said, moving around the back of the bench. "Yes." "Let's see it." Marcus reached slowly for his front pocket. "Slow," Bassett said, hand dropping to his holster. "I'm moving slowly," Marcus said. He said it the way a man says a thing he has said before. He produced the card. Bassett looked at it. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the card again. He did not recognize what he was looking at, or he recognized it and chose not to let it change anything. Either way, the handcuffs came out. Troy Bassett had been with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for 9 years. 9 years of shift work, traffic stops, domestic calls, and a performance record that was at its absolute best, mediocre. He had 2 commendations, one for assisting at a vehicle fire, one for finding a missing child in an industrial park, and 7 complaints, the most recent of which had been filed 8 months prior by a black father who said Bassett had detained his teenage son for walking home in a neighborhood where black teenagers walked home every day. That complaint had been investigated internally. It had been closed. Bassett had not changed. He was 38 years old, with the posture of a man who had spent nearly a decade performing authority for people who could not easily challenge it. And he had arrived at a place where performance had become indistinguishable from belief. He believed he was good at his job. He believed his instincts were reliable. He believed the man on the bench was wrong before he had a single fact to support. The belief. "Turn around," Bassett said, cuffs in hand. Marcus did not turn around. He stood very still. "Officer," Marcus said, "I work in this building. I'm here early because I have a briefing at 0730. That card in your hand is a DoD Common Access card. It's federal government issue." Bassett glanced at the card again. It was clearly a government issue credential. The gold and blue DoD seal was visible in the corner. The holographic strip ran across the bottom, and the rank designation was printed beneath a photograph that was unambiguously the man standing in front of him. "I don't know what this is," Bassett said. "It's a federal identification card," Marcus said. "I'm happy to show you the building directory if—" "Turn around. May I ask what crime I'm suspected of?" "We got a call about a suspicious person loitering on government property." Marcus looked at him. The bench was on a public walkway adjacent to the federal building, not on the property itself. He knew this precisely because he had checked the property boundary the first morning he'd arrived here, 2 weeks ago. Habit of a man who always identifies the parameters of his operating environment before he begins working in it. "I'm on the public walkway," Marcus said. "Not on federal property." The call said suspicious person. Bassett repeated, "I'm responding to the call." Was the call about me specifically? Bassett did not answer. Nolan had moved around behind Marcus now. He was 25 years old and 11 months into the job, and he was doing the thing that rookies do with aggressive training officers. He was mirroring the posture, absorbing the attitude, learning by watching what confidence was supposed to look like. He did not know enough yet to see the problem. "Hands behind your back," Bassett said. Marcus took a slow breath. He had a briefing in 31 minutes. He had 3 operators from his unit inside that building right now, setting up a classified communications review that could not proceed without him. He had a commanding officer who was going to call this walkway within the next 20 minutes, wondering why his chief warrant officer had not checked in. He thought about all of this. Then he thought about what happened when black men in hoodies argued with sheriff's deputies about property lines and federal credentials. "I want a note for anyone recording," Marcus said, at standard conversational volume, "that I have provided identification, stated my purpose, and established my location on public ground. I am complying under protest." He turned around. He put his hands behind his back. Bassett cuffed him with the brisk efficiency of a man who has done this enough times that it no longer registers as significant. "Marcus Webb, Chief Warrant Officer 4, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Command, attached to SEAL Team 7 with 2 silver stars, a bronze star with Valor device, and 4 combat deployments across 3 theaters, sat down on the government bench in handcuffs while the paper coffee cup, still half full, steamed quietly next to him. He looked straight ahead. He was thinking about timing. He was thinking about who to call first. He was not thinking about Bassett. Bassett was already a solved problem. Marcus just hadn't solved him yet. Inside his front pocket, under the DOD card that Bassett had pocketed, was a second card. It was smaller, matty black with no emblem. It carried a single phone number, the number routed to a duty officer at Naval Special Warfare Command, who, upon hearing a specific code phrase, would escalate the call to a chain that went significantly higher than a county sheriff's department. Marcus had not been able to reach the card. His hands were behind his back. Keywood had time. The holding room had a specific quality that Marcus had encountered in a few different configurations over the years. It was the quality of a space designed to produce anxiety through emptiness. No window, no reading material. A clock on the wall to track the passing of time that was simultaneously too available and too significant. The calculation its designers had made was that most people, sitting in a room like this, would begin to negotiate with whatever authority had placed them there. Marcus did not negotiate. He watched the clock. He thought about the briefing. He thought about the 3 operators inside the RDPC building who were right now looking at their own watches and beginning to calculate the same kind of problem he had already solved, the problem of a schedule that had been disrupted by something that should not have happened. He thought about Nolan. The rookie had not wanted to be there. Marcus had read it in the way the young officer had held himself behind Bassett, close enough to demonstrate solidarity, far enough to signal that this was Bassett's initiative, not his. He had recognized the posture. He had seen it in younger men, in his own unit, the specific body language of someone who knows the direction is wrong, but has not yet found the authority inside themselves to say so. Nolan would find it. Marcus hoped he found it before he needed it more urgently than he needed it today. Chen came back at 9:07 and told Marcus that a Navy attorney was on her way. Marcus thanked him. Chen left. The door did not close all the way, and through the gap Marcus could hear the station's morning rhythm phones, radio traffic, the particular acoustic signature of a place where people are doing their jobs. Normal, ordinary. He let it pass through him without catching on anything. He had his training. He had his record. He had 2 phone calls in motion and a JAG officer 12 minutes out. He had everything he needed. He checked the clock. The federal building was the Riverside Regional Defense Processing Center, a mid-sized complex that housed elements of several military branches, conducting administrative and intelligence coordination functions. It was not a high-profile facility. Most people in the county did not know what it was or what happened inside it. The 2 officers who had just cuffed a man on the walkway outside it did not know either. Bassett walked Marcus to the cruiser, hand on his arm, and placed him in the back seat with the practiced detachment of a man cataloging a routine stop. Nolan radioed in the detainment. Suspicious person, possible trespassing, cooperative subject, and received an acknowledgement from dispatch. Inside the vehicle, Marcus sat with his hands behind his back and took stock. He had roughly 28 minutes before his briefing was supposed to start. The building's duty desk would have already logged his arrival on the walkway via the external cameras. The RDPC had a full perimeter surveillance system, which meant there was footage of every moment of the interaction that had just occurred. He was not worried about being convicted of anything. He was calculating how long this would take and what the downstream effects would be. The cruiser window was down 3 inches. "Officer Bassett," Marcus said. Bassett turned from the driver's seat. "What?" "Before you drive anywhere, I'd suggest you contact the duty desk at the RDPC and verify my credentials. It will take approximately 90 seconds and will save a significant amount of paperwork on your end." "We're going to the station," Bassett said. "I understand. I'm asking you to make one call first. You can make calls from the station. The people inside that building will be looking for me in 27 minutes, Marcus said. When they don't find me, they will contact Naval Special Warfare Command. When navspecwar.com doesn't find me, they will contact the duty officer at this county department. That's a sequence of events that gets worse the later it starts." Bassett looked at Nolan. Nolan shrugged. Bassett started the car. The Riverside County Sheriff's Station on Ramona Expressway was 12 minutes from the federal complex. Marcus spent those 12 minutes quietly, watching the road through the security partition, doing the math on timing. At the station, he was processed through the initial intake protocol. Photographed, fingerprinted, logged by a booking officer named Chen who looked at his DOD card, looked at his face, and looked back at the card with the particular expression of someone who has just seen something that does not match the context. "Where'd you work?" Chen asked. "Government complex on Georgia." Chen looked at the card more carefully. He looked at Nolan. "What was he doing when you picked him up?" "Sitting on a bench," Nolan said. Chen put the card down on the desk. He did not say anything else. He finished the intake. Marcus was placed in a holding room, not a cell, a room with a table and 2 chairs and a camera in the corner, and told he could make a call. He made 2. The first was to a number in his memory that he dialed without looking. It rang once. "Duty officer. This is Webb, Echo Tango 7. I need Commander Dakarai at navspecwar.com. Tell him I'm at Riverside County Sheriff's on Ramona. Tell him I missed the 0730. A pause. "Copy that, Chief Hold." The second call was to his own unit's administrative officer, a warrant officer named Tran, who answered on the first ring and said, "Where are you?" before Marcus could speak. "Sheriff's Station. Detainment. Call is already in to navspecwar.com brief. The team and hold the materials. This will resolve in under 2 hours." "Understood," Tran said. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Marcus said. "Tell Rodriguez I'll buy him a coffee when I get back." He set the phone down. He sat back in the chair and waited. Bassett, in the meantime, was at his desk writing the incident report. He was writing it the way he had written dozens of others, with the specific architecture of language that police reports use to transform judgment calls into statements of observable fact, suspicious behavior, failure to provide satisfactory identification, non-compliance with verbal instructions prior to detainment. He was good at this. He had been doing it long enough that the language came easily. He did not mention that the subject had provided a DOD common access card at the time of the stop. He did not mention that the subject had clearly articulated his purpose and his employment at a federal facility. He characterized the stop as a response to a citizen complaint, which was technically accurate, in that a call had come in, and described the detainment as a lawful response to a subject who had been uncooperative. Marcus had not been uncooperative. Marcus had been correct, precise, and calm at every point. The detainment had occurred despite his cooperation, not because of the absence of it. Bassett finished the report. He reviewed it once. He submitted. His shift supervisor, a sergeant named Flores, walked over 20 minutes later with a look on his face that Bassett had seen before. The look of a man who has received news that requires him to recalibrate the situation faster than he would prefer. "Bassett, the guy in room 3, the bench guy. His command just called. They're sending a JAG officer." Bassett shrugged. "He brought a lawyer." "He didn't bring a lawyer. Troy, his command is sending a JAG officer. Military, legal, Navy." Flores looked at him. "You ran the card he gave you?" Bassett hesitated. "I didn't have a reader." Flores stared at him for 3 full seconds. "Call the federal building," Flores said. "Right now. Get me the duty desk." The federal building's duty desk picked up on the second ring. The information they provided to Sergeant Flores took approximately 90 seconds to deliver. Flores stood at his desk for a moment. After the call ended, he looked at the incident report on his screen. He looked at the door to room 3. He said one word, very quietly, to no one in particular. Then he walked to the captain's office. Outside in the parking lot, a black Navy sedan had just pulled up. The JAG officer was not alone. Marcus Webb had been sitting in the holding room for 47 minutes when the door opened. He had spent those 47 minutes doing 3 things: monitoring the minute hand of the analog clock on the wall, running through the 3 most likely administrative outcomes of the morning, and thinking about nothing at all. The last one was a skill. It was the skill, in his opinion, the ability to stop the internal narration and simply exist inside a situation without escalating it with thought. He had learned it in SEER school. He had refined it in the field. It had saved him more than once. The person who opened the door was not a sheriff's officer. She was a woman in Navy service uniform. Lieutenant Commander's insignia on her collar, JAG core device on her chest, a briefcase in her left hand, and a tablet in her right. She was 38 years old and had the efficient, unhurried manner of someone who has handled these calls before and knows exactly what order to do things in. Chief Webb. Commander Ellison. She sat down across from him. She did not look around the room. She looked at him. You're okay. I'm fine. She set the tablet on the table. NavSpecWar.com has been notified. Commander Dakarai is on the phone with the county sheriff right now. We have the full sequence from the RNDPC external cameras. The building logs, everything on the walkway. Captain Shores has reviewed the footage. What's Shores saying? He's saying what anyone watching the footage would say, Ellison said. He's also saying you kept your hands visible the entire time. You complied the moment you stated your objection, and you provided ID at the first request. Marcus nodded once. The incident report is a problem, Ellison said. Officer Bassett characterized the stop as a response to non-compliance. That's not what the footage shows. I know, Marcus said. How do you want to handle this? Marcus looked at the clock. 8:42. There's a briefing we need to complete today, he said. The materials are time-sensitive. I need to be in that building before noon. You'll be out of here in 40 minutes, Ellison said. I can guarantee that. Then after, Marcus said, whatever needs to happen, I want it on the record. All of it. The full stop. The full interaction. The report as written versus what the footage shows. Ellison opened her briefcase. I have a federal civil rights complaint form with me. Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. It's a federal charge. It goes above the department. File it, Marcus said. She looked at him for a moment. You understand this will be public? Good, he said. She set the form on the table between them. Sign here, she said. And here. And I need you to write in your own words exactly what happened from the moment you sat down on that bench to the moment they put you in this room. Take your time. Be precise. Marcus picked up the pen. He was precise. He wrote for 11 minutes without stopping, the kind of writing that comes from a man who has filed after-action reports in combat conditions, who is accustomed to reconstructing sequences of events in exact chronological order under pressure. He did not editorialize. He did not express anger. He simply described in complete sentences what had occurred. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at Ellison. What happens to the other guys? He said. Other guys. Bassett has complaints. 7 of them, according to Tran, who ran him while I was on the phone. Marcus looked at her. Who else has he done this to? Ellison was quiet for a moment. That's a separate investigation, she said. I know, Marcus said. I am asking whether one is going to happen. She looked at the complaint form, at his signature at the bottom, at the 11 minutes of precise, factual narrative above it. With this, she said, yes. Marcus nodded. Outside the holding room, the station had been changing in texture for the past 20 minutes. Captain Rosa Menendez, station commander. 15 years with the department, the kind of supervisor who had survived the politics of law enforcement long enough to develop a very reliable sense of when something was about to become very large very quickly. Had received the call from Sergeant Flores at 8:19 and had been on the phone with 3 different people since then. The first was the county sheriff's duty officer. The second was the county attorney. The third was a number she had never called before, which had been given to her 8 months ago by a federal liaison, and which she had written in a small notebook under the heading, "In case something crosses lines." She was calling it now. The woman who answered identified herself as Deputy Inspector General Wren, Department of Defense. Menendez explained the situation in under 4 minutes. Wren said, "We have the footage. We're already aware. Send the incident report to the address I'm giving you now." She gave Menendez the address. Menendez wrote it down. "What's going to happen?" Menendez asked. "Today, he goes home," Wren said. "After that, we'll be in touch." Menendez looked at the incident report on her screen, at Bassett's name at the bottom of it. She thought about the 7 prior complaints. She thought about the report she would need to write about this morning. She thought about the word after. The hearing room at the Riverside County Courthouse was Courtroom 4 Bites, a standard mid-size criminal proceeding space, wood-paneled, fluorescent lit, with the smell of carpet cleaner and old paper that attaches itself to buildings where the consequences are decided. It had been reserved for the preliminary hearing on the detainment of Marcus Webb, scheduled for 9 days after the arrest. The hearing was procedural. It was supposed to take 45 minutes. It took 11. Bassett arrived with the county's legal representative, a deputy DA named Holt, who had been assigned the case that morning and had spent 2 hours reviewing the materials before calling the DA's office to ask, with careful professional neutrality, whether there was a larger picture he should be aware of. He had been told there was not. He had sat with that answer for 90 minutes and then called again. The second call had been more illuminating. Holt walked into Courtroom 4 Bites carrying a briefcase and an expression that suggested a man who has been asked to argue a position he no longer fully believes in. Bassett sat next to him in a department-issued suit, arms folded, jaw forward. He was still running the narrative from the incident report. He had told it enough times, to Flores, to the captain, to the union rep, to his own reflection in the mirror over the past 9 days, that he had begun to believe it was true. He had responded to a call. The subject had been uncooperative. The detainment was lawful. He was not prepared for what walked through the doors at 9:04. The Pentagon legal team entered the courtroom in a group of 4. Lead counsel was Captain Gerald Nwosu, Judge Advocate General's Corps, United States Navy. A compact, silver-haired man in dress whites, with the deliberate, unhurried walk of someone who has argued before federal courts and military tribunals and considers a county preliminary hearing a formality. Behind him were 2 lieutenant commanders in matching service uniforms, each carrying briefcases that were visibly larger and more organized than anything on the opposing table. The 4th member of the team was in civilian clothes, a dark suit, DOD badge on a lanyard, and carried a laptop that he set up on the table with the efficiency of a man who was done. This specific setup in other courtrooms. The courtroom went quiet in a way that courtrooms rarely go quiet. Judge Patricia Soames looked at the group. She looked at Holt. She looked at her docket. "I see we have federal representation today," she said. "Yes, Your Honor," Nwosu said. "Captain Gerald Nwosu, JAG Corps representing the United States Navy and the interests of Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, whose detainment on November 14th is the subject of this proceeding. We have also filed a parallel action in the federal district, which I believe Your Honor has been notified about." Soames looked at the notification on her tablet. "I have," she said. Holt leaned over to Bassett and said something quietly. Bassett's jaw tightened. Nwosu set his briefcase on the table and opened it. He removed a single folder. He did not rush. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to enter 7 items into the record before we discuss the charge itself. The first is the full surveillance footage from the Riverside Regional Defense Processing Center, which covers the entirety of the interaction between Officer Bassett and Chief Webb from 6:53 to 7:11 a.m. on November 14th. The second is the RDPC visitor and employee log, which shows Chief Webb's daily access entry over the preceding 14 working days. The third is Chief Webb's DoD Common Access Card record, confirming his federal employment status and classification level. The fourth is Officer Bassett's incident report as filed. The fifth is the transcript of that report, cross-referenced against the surveillance footage, with timestamps showing 17 points of material discrepancy between the report's characterization of events and what the footage shows. The sixth is Officer Bassett's prior complaint record, 7 complaints over 9 years, 3 of which involve documented racial profiling incidents. And the seventh. Nwosu paused. It was a practiced pause. The pause of a man who knows the weight of what he is about to say and wants the room to be still when he says it. The seventh is Chief Webb's service record. He set the folder on the table. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb has served in the United States Navy for 15 years. He has completed 4 combat deployments. He holds 2 silver stars, a bronze star with Valor device, a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, and a Combat Action Ribbon. He was on active federal duty on the morning of November 14th, reporting for a classified intelligence briefing at the RDPC, a briefing that was delayed approximately 2 hours as a direct consequence of Officer Bassett's actions. He looked at Holt. The county's position, as I understand it, is that this was a lawful stop based on a citizen complaint. We are prepared to demonstrate that no verified citizen complaint exists in the dispatch records for that time window, that the incident report contains 17 material misrepresentations, and that the stop was initiated based on Officer Bassett's visual assessment of a black man sitting on a public bench. He looked at Judge Soames. "We are not here to have the charge dismissed," Nwusu said. "We are here to put the full record into evidence before the federal proceeding begins. We want this court and this county to understand, precisely and permanently, what happened on that walkway." Judge Soames looked at the folder on the table. She looked at Bassett. Bassett was looking at the folder, too. He had gone very still. His jaw was no longer forward. The incident report narrative, the one he had rehearsed into belief over the past 9 days, had met 7 items of documented evidence, and it had not survived the encounter. Holt stood up. "Your Honor, the county would like to request a brief recess." "You'll have 10 minutes, Soames said. She did not look at Bassett when she said it. Marcus Webb sat at the plaintiff's table and watched. He had arrived in his dress uni, form Navy service khakis, ribbons on his chest, the silver stars catching the fluorescent light of Courtroom 4 bites. He had not worn it to impress. He had worn it because Ellison had told him the room needed to understand who he was, and this was the clearest way to say it. He had been in this room for 14 minutes. He had not said a single word. He did not need to. Captain Nwusu had done everything. The 10-minute recess became 30. When Holt returned to the courtroom, he walked directly to Judge Soames's clerk and requested a brief off-record conversation with the judge. It was granted. What was said in that conversation did not enter the official record. What happened as a result of it did. When the hearing resumed, Soames made 2 rulings from the bench. The first was that all 7 items entered by the Pentagon legal team were admitted into evidence. The second was that the county's own procedural position, based on the incident, report as filed, was materially unsupported by the available documentation, and that the hearing would proceed on the basis of the full record. Holt did not object. But the second twist in the story of Marcus Webb's morning on November 14th was not about the hearing. It emerged 4 days later, when the DoD Inspector General's office completed its preliminary review of Bassett's prior 7 complaints and submitted a finding to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. The finding noted that 3 of the 7 prior complaints involved documented stops of black men in or near federal facilities, 2 at a VA medical center, 1 at a state workforce development office that shared a parking lot with a military recruiting station. In each case, the subject had provided documentation. In each case, the stop had been characterized in the incident report as a response to non-compliance. In each case, the report contained language strikingly similar to the language used in the November 14th report. The same phrasing, the same architecture of justification. He was running a template, Commander Ellison told Marcus when she briefed him on the finding. He didn't profile you because you were unusual. He profiled you because he had a system. You were the 8th person who walked into it. You were just the first one the system couldn't contain. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "The other 7, he said. "What happened to their complaints?" "Cleared. All 7. The union handled 3. Internal Affairs cleared 4. And the people." Ellison looked at her notes. One of them was a Marine gunnery sergeant. "He didn't pursue it. Said he'd had enough. 3 others filed formal complaints that went nowhere. The remaining 3 we don't know. The complaints were filed by third parties. We can't locate the original subjects." Marcus sat with that for a moment. "Find them," he said. "We're trying." "Find them," he said again. "All of them. Every person in Bassett's complaint history. Because when this goes to federal court, I want every one of those cases in the record, not just mine." Ellison closed her notebook. "That's going to make this significantly larger than a single incident charge," she said. "Good," Marcus said. The federal charges were filed 22 days after the arrest. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, working in coordination with the DoD Inspector General's office, filed a complaint under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, the deprivation of rights under color of law against Troy Bassett. and a parallel administrative complaint against the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for failure to adequately supervise an officer with a documented pattern of civil rights violations. The word pattern was doing significant work in that filing. The 7 prior complaints, combined with the forensic analysis of Bassett's incident reports, which the DOJ Digital Forensics Unit had determined used a template structure with specific phrases recurring verbatim across multiple reports, established not a series of individual errors but a documented, systematic approach to justifying unjustified stops after the fact. The union moved to represent Bassett. The county attorney's office, in what was described as an administrative decision, declined to fund the union's legal effort through the county's indemnification program. Their reasoning, set out in a brief internal memo that subsequently became public, was that the available evidence did not support a finding that Bassett had acted in good faith. The union retained private counsel. Sergeant Flores was placed on administrative review for the period, during which Bassett's complaints had been processed and cleared under his supervision. He was not charged. He cooperated fully. Captain Menendez submitted a voluntary statement to both the Internal Affairs Division and the DOJ, in which he described, in precise detail, the sequence of events on the morning of November 14th and the prior history she had been aware of. Her statement was notable for its specificity and its lack of self-protection. She named every date, every call, every decision she had made and every decision she had not made soon enough. The statement would later be entered into evidence at the federal trial as Exhibit 22. Bassett, during the investigation period, gave one interview to his union's communications team, which published it on their website under the headline, "Officer Speaks Out on Politicized Prosecution." In the interview, Bassett said he had done what any officer would have done in the same circumstances, that the complaint had originated with a civilian call, and that the federal government was using his case to make a political point. The DOJ's response to the interview, delivered through a spokesperson, was 4 sentences long. The last one noted that the civilian complaint Bassett had cited as the basis for the stop had been reviewed and that no record existed of any such call in the county dispatch system for the relevant time window. Bassett's attorney did not issue a response to that statement. 3 weeks before the federal trial, Bassett's attorney filed a motion for dismissal, arguing that the charges were prosecutorial overreach, and that the stop, however imperfect in execution, did not meet the threshold of deliberate civil rights deprivation under the federal statute. The motion cited 4 prior federal cases. The DOJ cited 8. The motion was denied. Nolan Bassett's partner, the 25-year-old rookie who had been 11 months into the job and who had stood behind Marcus on the walkway, had cooperated with the investigation from day 3. He had provided a statement that corroborated the footage at every point and had explicitly contradicted 3 specific claims in Bassett's incident report. In exchange, he received no charge and a formal letter of counseling. He requested a transfer to a different patrol sector. It was granted. The 7 prior complainants, or 5 of them, the 2 who could not be located, were added to the federal complaint as documented prior victims. Their cases would be referenced in the charging document and in the sentencing phase. Bassett was formally arrested, processed, and released on bond 31 days after November 14th. He did not make a public statement. The federal trial took place in the United States District Court for the Central District of California, 4 months and 11 days after the morning on the walkway. The courtroom was larger than 4 bytes at the Riverside County Courthouse. It needed to be. The gallery was standing room from the first day. Representatives from 3 civil rights organizations had filed friend-of-court briefs. The case had been covered by 4 national news outlets and 14 regional ones. A retired federal judge who had spent 20 years on the Central District bench had written an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times the week before the trial began, describing the forensic analysis of Bassett's incident reports as one of the most clear-cut documented patterns of post hoc justification fabrication she had seen in her career. Troy Bassett arrived with his private defense attorney, a man named Garrett, who was competent and experienced, and who had spent the previous 3 months building the most defensible version of a case that had very little defense left in it. Marcus Webb was not required to testify. He came anyway. He entered the courtroom in dress whites, full-service uniform, medals in order, the silver stars catching the light from the windows on the east side of the room. He sat in the gallery, not at the plaintiff's table, because the federal proceeding was a criminal matter and he was not a party to it. He was a witness and a victim and a man who had decided that the full record was going to be seen. He sat in the second row. He did not look at Bassett. The prosecution's case was built around three pillars. The prosecution played the footage for the jury twice. The first time, they played it straight through. 17 minutes and 40 seconds. No narration. No pause. The second time, they played it with timestamps displayed in the corner and paused at three specific moments. The first pause was at the moment Marcus offered his DOD card. The second was at the moment Bassett pocketed the card without reading it. The third was at the moment the handcuffs went on. 3 minutes and 14 seconds, the prosecutor said, pointing at the timestamp. From the moment Chief Webb provided federal identification to the moment he was placed in restraints. 3 minutes and 14 seconds. In that time, the card was accepted, pocketed, and never referenced again. The subject was told to turn around without being told why. He complied. She looked at the jury. He did everything right. Everything. And he was still put in handcuffs. She clicked the footage off. That is the case. That is everything you need to know. The rest is just documentation of how long it took the system to catch up with what a camera recorded in 3 minutes and 14 seconds on a public walkway in November. The first was the footage from the RDPC, 17 minutes and 40 seconds of unedited surveillance video that showed, without narration or editing, every moment of the interaction from Marcus sitting on the bench to his placement in the hall cruiser. The footage had been authenticated by two independent forensic analysts. It had never been disputed. The second was the incident report analysis. The DOJ digital forensics expert walked the jury through the report's construction in detail. The specific phrases that recurred across Bassett's prior reports, the structural pattern of the justification language, the 17 points of material discrepancy between what the report described and what the footage showed. She had prepared a side-by-side visual exhibit that compared the November 14th report to three prior reports. The language in the key sections was, in places, nearly identical. The third pillar was Bassett himself. He took the stand on day 3. He was way prepared. He answered questions carefully, maintained composure, and delivered the good-faith narrative with the practiced clarity of a man who had been over it many times. He said he had responded to a call. He said the subject had been uncooperative. He said he had done what the training required. The prosecution's cross-examination took 40 minutes. It began with the dispatch records. Officer Bassett, your incident report states that you responded to a citizen complaint about a suspicious person on the walkway of the federal complex. Correct? Correct. Dispatch records for the 6:40 to 7:15 a.m. window on November 14th show no such call logged. Are you aware of that? Dispatch doesn't log everything. Are you aware that the dispatch system logs all incoming calls regardless of response status? Garrett objected. The object, Ion, was overruled. I may have mischaracterized the origin of the call, Bassett said. You wrote in your report, quote, responding to citizen complaint, end quote. You're now saying you may have mischaracterized it. What was the actual origin of your approach to Chief Webb? Bassett looked at Garrett. Garrett gave no signal. I observed suspicious behavior during my patrol, Bassett said. So there was no call. Not in the formal sense. Officer Bassett, yes or no? Was there a call? A long pause. No, he said. The jury foreman wrote something down. The prosecution moved through the 17 discrepancies in the report methodically, one by one, asking Bassett to reconcile each with the footage. By discrepancy 9, Bassett had stopped attempting to reconcile and had shifted to variations of I don't recall in my recollection at the time. By discrepancy 14, Garrett had objected 4 times. All 4 overruled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 50 minutes. When they returned, they did not look at Bassett. Guilty. On the federal charge of deprivation of rights under color of law. Judge Marcus Cole, who had been on the Central District bench for 11 years and who had, early in the proceedings, ruled from the bench that the footage was not context for the incident report, but the incident report was context for the footage, looked at Bassett across the courtroom. You made a decision on a public walkway based on what a man looked like, the judge said. You then wrote a report designed to make that decision look like something else. And when that report came into contact with a camera record, it collapsed. You have spent 4 months arguing that it should not have collapsed. The jury has decided it should. The room was very quiet. Troy Bassett, on the federal charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, I sentence you to 60 months in federal custody. You are permanently decertified as a law enforcement officer in the state of California. You are barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity in any jurisdiction. You are further ordered to pay restitution to each of the 7 documented prior victims in amounts to be determined at the sentencing supplemental hearing. The gavel came down. Bassett looked at the table. The marshals moved. The handcuffs were different from the ones on the walkway. Heavier, federal issue, chrome rather than nickel, but the sound they made was identical. 2 sharp metallic clicks. The sound of a system finally catching up. Marcus Webb was back on a walkway 3 weeks after the verdict. Different walkway. Naval Air Station, Coronado, San Diego. The Pacific on one side, the Bay on the other, and the particular kind of morning that California saves for days when it wants to remind you why people live here. Clear, cold, a salt wind off the water that cuts through whatever you're wearing. He was walking with Commander Dakarai, his commanding officer, who had driven down from the NAVSPEC Warcom building specifically for this conversation. Dakarai was a tall man who said less than he thought and meant more than he said, and he was working through a coffee in silence that Marcus recognized as the comfortable kind. Nusu says the restitution phase goes well, Dakarai said. Ellison's been on it, Marcus said. The 2 complainants they couldn't originally locate. They found both of them. One was in Houston, one was living in Germany. Both are in the case now. Dakarai nodded. You could have walked, Dakarai said. The first morning. Could have come inside and let the JAG handle the complaint, stayed out of it. Marcus looked at the water. No, I couldn't, he said. Why not? Because the 7 people he did this to before me didn't have a JAG officer, Marcus said. Didn't have a command that would make a phone call in 10 minutes. Didn't have a service record that a federal judge would put on a table. He paused. They sat in holding rooms and they went home. Nothing changed. I had everything they didn't have, so I used it. Dakarai was quiet for a moment. The department is implementing a new protocol, he said. Mandatory scan readers in all county cruisers for DOD credentials. Supervisor review of all off-duty stop logs within 24 hours. It's something, Marcus said. It's not enough. No, Marcus looked at him, but it's something. They walked in silence for a while. A junior petty officer coming the other direction saw Marcus coming and straightened slightly without being told to. The involuntary reflex of recognizing someone worth straightening for. Marcus gave him a small nod and kept walking. Rodriguez said to tell you he's still waiting on that coffee, Dakarai said. Marcus smiled. The first full one in a while. Tell him to put it on my tab, he said. They walked to the end of the walkway and stood there for a moment, looking out at the water. Then they turned and walked back. Forward. Troy Bassett sat on a bench outside a federal building and saw a black man in a hoodie and decided, before he had a single fact, what the situation was. He was wrong. He was wrong about Marcus Webb. He was wrong about the 8 other people before Marcus Webb. He had been wrong so many times, in so many reports, in such consistent and deliberate language, that the DOJ's own forensic analysts found the wrongness embedded in the architecture of his writing. And Marcus Webb, who had 2 silver stars and a bronze star with valor and 15 years of service and the composure of a man who has operated in places where losing composure costs lives, sat in handcuffs on that bench, did the math on timing, made 2 phone calls, signed a federal complaint, and let the record do what records do when they are complete. He did not need to shout. He did not need to fight. He needed to be precise, patient, and willing to put every name, every date, every prior victim into a document that a federal court would read. He did all 3. And the courtroom that Bassett thought would protect him became the room where the full truth was displayed. In order, to a jury that spent 4 hours and 50 minutes deciding what everyone watching already knew. If this story of composure, service, and institutional justice landed right drop-alike. Share this with someone who needs to see what it looks like when the record is complete and the system finally reads it. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. The truth keeps its own timeline, but it always arrives